But yes, we will be talking about that with, we'll be welcoming Natalie back to the stage, who's going to facilitate a great conversation on what we identify as being good now, what we'd like to keep, what we'd like to save our progress with, and how do we tackle that challenge for the next 10, 15, 20 years as a profession in the retirement space. So Natalie, would you like to come back to the stage, please? Thank you.
I'm quite liking all this hopping on and off. I get quite a lot of applause. It's quite nice. Hi again, everyone. So as the guy said, we're in level 2 now, so we're in this new realm where we want to try and work out what's good. And to do that, we're going from big picture to kind of hone in on one topic, and that's retirement advice and tech. So we're going to talk about that just now. We know that many firms will be dealing with a large number of at-retirement or near-retirement clients. So we just want to kind of dig into what are the problems here and how does tech kind of contribute or help with those. So we're going to hear from 2 practitioner voices. They are Meagher from Dharmea Financial Planning and Kat Mock from Unity Paraplanning. And we've also got Roland Whyte from Nokkel, who's going to talk about things from a tech provider side of the fence. So please welcome them to the stage.
Rogue phone there, that was great.
So hi, thanks for joining us. So we've done that high level stuff. We really want to kind of hone in on retirement advice. So thanks for being a representative panel kind of to get us into that. So Marie, if I start with you as the kind of the planner representative here, in terms of the systems and the tech that you're using to deliver retirement advice to clients, do you find them generally helpful, or actually are they a kind of hindrance that gets in the way of the good planning that you do you think?
At the basic level, yeah, they're a useful tool. But from a wider perspective, they can be quite challenging. There are big blockers as far as providers are concerned that could make it far easier for us as advisors to actually even get information. It's an absolute disgrace in 2023 that we're fighting against everybody all the time just to get a basic bit of information. And the timescales are shocking.
Okay, there's a lot of amens to that, I think. So Kat, you're kind of here as the paraplanner voice. So in terms of your perspective, do you think that generally tech supports you in your role? And are there parts, if any, that the tech works well, do you think?
I couldn't do my role without tech. I'm an outsourcer. I have a team of outsourced paraplanners working in various different places, so I couldn't live without tech. What I would say is that there's so much of it that it's very difficult to take one hat off and move on to the next. So I find the best tech is tech that you can pick up and run with immediately, so that you can actually just switch tasks just throughout the day. And there are some of those out there that do that, but I'm finding that some of the gold nuggets are all in different places across different bits of technology. So people need to have a conversation.
Yeah, okay. And Roland, from your perspective, I mean, you're sort of here as our sort of tech provider, so you'll have a view across tech across the piece. So when you kind of think about how tech is deployed in the world of retirement planning, what's your sort of sense of whether that's good or not in terms of what people are expecting it to do?
So first of all, I think tech has, as I think it's been mentioned on quite a few occasions already, has come a long way over the last 10 years, and it's accelerating. And certainly from currently what I'm doing now, but previously at FNZ, the velocity of enhancements, propositions, things that you can grab hold of, whether it's AI or whether it's data, that's moving at pace. I think it's really important to take a bit of a step back and actually really think about the consumer problems that ultimately we're trying to solve with tech. And what I mean about that is, and if we take retirement as the example, it's not about sort of plugging in a sort of a better CRM or a better KYC process or a fact find. So, it's about the whole journey from start to end, understanding a consumer, what are their ambitions, goals, but ultimately through to actually what assets do you have, how do you equip the advisor to think about what's the right drawdown strategy. So it's more about the journey. I think we need to keep on coming back to actually how we're solving consumer problems, with an eye on consumer duty, but what is the problem we're ultimately trying to solve, and how does tech support that? Rather than, I think the risk is if you start with just the tech, and this is something better you can do, you might get a little bit lost, wood from the trees. And I think that's a really important theme to, sort of for all of us to challenge ourselves when we're thinking about tech. How does that solve a consumer outcome or problem?
Okay. And so, Kat, I kind of wanted to ask you kind of a bit kind of future forward now. So if, as the guy said, if we're sort of we know where we are now, if we're looking sort of 10 to 15 years out, there's some things that we kind of just inherently know are coming down the track. So we know that the demographic is going to change. We know that there's going to be sort of different shifts in the population. We know there's going to be workplace pensions scattered all over the shop. We might also kind of be thinking about intergenerational planning. So when you think about, I suppose, where we are now, and particularly the product mix, do you think anything needs to change on that front from where we are now to where we sort of think we're going to in terms of the direction of travel in what's needed?
I think we've actually got a lot of choice at the moment. I think that there just needs to be a bit of a mindset shift. Mm-hmm. We had a discussion over breakfast this morning about all the different options that are available to solve a problem and to meet a client's goals and objectives. And there are loads of products. There are loads of ways to do it. And I think it's a case of having the mindset that you've got this massive array of things you could do, and being able to access them, understand them, pick them up and put them down, and know when to bring them into your mix. So I think the mindset should, over the next sort of 10, 15 years, switch from these are the things that we generally do to, okay, these are the options, what are we bringing in, what are we putting back for these clients? So almost interchanging the outcome.
Yeah. And I suppose just to sort of get into that a little bit then, so the idea is that, people like yourself and Marie and the planners and practitioners in the room are about helping clients achieve their retirement goals. So that might be that you need that product flexibility, you need that guarantees. I mean, do you have any sort of sense of, is there a shift coming there, do you think, in terms of perhaps products needing to flex with people's retirement and approaches to that changing as well?
That was something we discussed this morning, was that sometimes you're looking at a client and they're going to need advice on an ongoing basis for the next 5-10 years. And some clients will come to a planner and actually you solve their problem now, and then they don't need to do anything for the next sort of 4 or 5 years. So there needs to be a space to accommodate those two different needs of service. So the products and the investments you're going to be recommending in those cases are completely different. So I think more of a recognition around what is appropriate for that particular client and having those directions you can go down, that's something I think we'll see more of.
Okay. And Marie, do you have any thoughts on kind of what we need in terms of retirement planning to kind of cope with what's coming down the track?
More education.
Mm-hmm.
My personal views are that the younger generation is not educated enough around what's needed longer term. Mm-hmm. There is a huge, huge black hole coming that just seems to have been like swept under the carpet as far as the amount of money that's going to be needed in retirement. People are living longer, and this instant gratification or instant access to everything that's within society. Amazon was mentioned, you'd put a delivery in, you get it the same afternoon. Building a pot of money to have enough in retirement is not going to happen overnight. So I think educating a younger generation, and whether that's through tech or whether that's through actual humans, will be a conversation moving forward. But I think it's something that we really, really need to start getting hold of. It's going to be a serious problem.
And is that something that kind of concerns you in terms of your business, that intergenerational piece?
I think the intergenerational piece, I'm fortunate that I work with different generations. I can have grandparents, parents, and children. But I think that there is a lot of people that have a mindset that I know anyway. I don't know what other people think, but that middle road, oh, I don't need to worry about that. I'm going to inherit from my mum and dad. Mum and dad have got a completely different idea. They're off on a cruise. They're living life, but they're also living longer. So care home fees, if anybody's ever had a look at care home fees and looking after them, unless they're going to move mum and dad in and do the caring of them, they're going to find their inheritance is actually well and truly gone. So I think that's another area that there's a misconception of what the money will do.
I was going to ask you, Roland, on that actually. So there is that kind of perhaps assumption from younger generations that, well, they've got the house, they've got the assets, they've done the planning, and that's just all going to magically cascade my way. But the reality might be a bit different. So, I mean, do you have any thoughts on that kind of misconception around inheritance? Is that something that perhaps planners need to start addressing?
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, first, just to echo Marie's comments on the education point, it's a bit like steering the Titanic. Sort of this is not going to happen overnight. In terms of being aware of what you need to do in order to reach retirement, and we're past the days of defined benefit schemes. It's all about saving, but trying to convince someone in their 20s that they should be putting money away for 40 years' time is not an easy thing to do. But then back to your question. So there's sort of a longer term objective, but I think the shorter term one is I'll stick with the Titanic theme, the iceberg coming towards us, which is people haven't saved enough. I'm going to borrow some Lancat statistics. So 48 billion. Retirement income gap, but equally sat alongside, if you assume private pensions are 6.5 trillion, sort of house wealth, so houses that your own home buy to let is not far behind that. That's what 5.5 trillion. Well, that's a pretty big asset you need to take into account. So house wealth, and this may be a little bit self-serving given what Nokkel does, but I can't see a way that you can't ignore house wealth when you're trying to solve some pretty big fundamental challenges in terms of bringing people into retirement and helping people really understand, what are the key fundamental decisions they need to make, and make it easy for them to digest. So, can I retire 10 years earlier if I do something with my house, or am I going to have to work into my 70s? Actually, just bringing those types of conversations to life, I think, is going to be pretty important, because back to the generational point, we haven't seen a group of people necessarily going through I'm relying on my DC pension. You haven't seen that sort of pain properly come through yet, and then it leads on to some very difficult conversations around. Actually, we're going to have to use the wealth in the house. Your inheritance isn't going to be, what you thought it might, like your parents before you. The family home may need to go. These are very, very delicate conversations, and equipping advisors to have the right conversation to make the right financial decisions, I think, is going to become increasingly important before we hit the iceberg.
Okay. And so we've kind of talked about the processes, and we've talked about the tech piece of it. But I suppose it'd be interesting to understand from yourselves, Kat and Marie, about the emotions that sort of attach within this, because it's sort of, retirement planning, it's everybody's bread and butter here, but it's people's dreams, isn't it? It's kind of real, tangible stuff. So I suppose, Kat, my question for you is how are you kind of approaching that in terms of assumptions that are maybe being made and things that people are thinking about in retirement versus kind of what you are understanding the client wants to achieve?
So from a paraplanning perspective, it can be quite easy to sit on the data and focus very much on the data. But actually, the client's objectives and needs and the outcomes they're going to get are the key driver. So you almost have to divorce yourself from some of the data points and in some respects, some of the technology, to actually think about the actual person. So when we're talking about what are you going to do in retirement, that can be a moving piece as you approach it. So between now and 5 years' time, your views on when you're going to stop working and how you're going to stop working and what that's going to look like and what the opportunities are and what your assets look like will change. As you're educated, as you're learning about what those things are, then the goalposts move. And we need to move with that to help them get to where they want to be. And then have honest conversations about what's realistic. Because, it is about dreams, it is about goals, and it's about your future, but it's also about making what you've worked for last and, having those compromises where you need to.
Okay, great. Marie, I'm going to come to you in a sec, but I just wanted to remind people in the room that you can ask questions. We are going to have some roving mics for this session if you want to be brave and put your hand up, and if you want to do it in the app, you can do that too. And if you're at home, I haven't forgotten you, you can also give us your questions and we will ask them to the panel. But Marie, I kind of wanted just to ask about that point that Kat just mentioned, because it's kind of interesting, like when I'm kind of on things like this, I kind of hear from providers about how they're deploying tech in retirement advice. So we've heard from one provider who's using sort of AI to like track people's pensions, and then on top of that, they found the pension. They're also understanding about benefits and suitability, almost writing a report, and that's all being done by AI. But I wonder kind of what you think about that in terms of, because you're very much about the people and the tech as opposed to just the tech perhaps running roughshod.
Absolutely. Yeah, I cringe at AI.
And why is that? Is that an instinctive thing? Or?
It's no, I think we've got to be very, very careful that we don't lose human beings. So we bring, as advisors, as humans, a huge amount to a client situation. The AI is not going to tell you, are they getting divorced? The AI is not going to tell you, are they ill? The AI is not going to tell you that they're struggling with money. They're going to look at the data, and the data's fine, but that's not the human element. Human beings are very complex. They're very different in personalities. All three of us are different personalities, and our clients are the same. We tend to get clients that are similar, but they're not all the same. So getting something that's just going to tick a box, and AI is going to look at the data, and that's it. So, I'm not, as we've discussed, I'm not fully into the tech and it's all singing, all dancing. I think sometimes we rely on tech too much and the human is lost. Ask some of the providers. You can't get through on the telephone. No humans. www.goonline. And it wastes so much time. Tech's supposed to speed things up, make our lives easier, not make it more difficult. So, I think we need to be very careful. But, technology and me don't exactly see eye to eye all the time.
Well, we're nothing if not having representative voices on here. And Roland, just coming to you briefly. So I think for maybe people who don't know in the room, what Nokkel is about trying to address a very specific problem within the whole piece around retirement advice, and that is housing wealth. So we've kind of touched on the inheritance piece earlier, but I suppose I guess what I want to understand is why housing wealth specifically, of all the areas that you could delve into with retirement advice, and the role of tech within that, I think, is quite interesting to kind of get more of an understanding of.
Yeah. So, and again, maybe just to comment on the previous question, I think the one thing we did agree on over breakfast was tech is there to empower people, not to try and solve issues directly. So, I think the example we talked about was, sort of a black box where you can't actually explain what's happening within the black box, but actually something that supports a conversation. And, there's a little bit of a link into what we're doing at Nokkel in terms of integrating house wealth into financial planning. It's probably a good example of a topic or an asset class where, a little bit unlike investments and pensions, you can actually have a conversation about it. It does sort of drive, not necessarily drive, but it's an important factor when you're thinking about what your goals are. What's my next house? How long do I want to stay in my house? So that was part of the logic behind Nokkel. So just very, very briefly, and I'll try not to turn this into a pitch, so apologies if it sounds like one, but so what Nokkel is doing, initially in partnership with FNZ, is to integrate house wealth into a holistic view on net assets. But if I take a little bit of a step back, where did that come from? It came from thinking about things like retirement. When you're thinking about drawdown strategies or sort of saving for retirement, clearly pensions and investments are the driving force. But looking at the stats that I stole from Lancat, property wealth is pretty significant, and when you have choices to make in retirement, actually having an appreciation of your holistic net worth is a great starting point to then have sort of a wholesome conversation around what choices you want to make, obviously with the help and support of a financial planner. The next stage of that logic was, well, if we know that pension investments are absolutely key, but actually house wealth is the next largest asset, we should be integrating that into a holistic view on wealth. You can take it a few steps further and say, well, actually, again, the house, you touch a lot of financial products and solutions, whether that's saving for a deposit, sort of mortgage on a house, life and protection, insurance, if when someone's bought their house, when their insurance renewal date is, all the way through to, well, actually, maybe I need to realize some of this value to reach retirement and, quite frankly, to enjoy retirement. And that may very well be the case and why that's necessary. So, sorry, that was a very long answer to your question, but so really what we're doing is integrating that into the financial planning process to help people make better and more informed decisions.
Okay, great, thank you. Do we have any questions in the room? If you do, stick your hand up and we'll get a mic to you. Oh, people are very shy. Okay, in which case I might summon our oracle and see if anybody else is a bit more chatty. But if you would like to ask questions, just let us know and we'll get a mic to you. So, Oracle, where shall we start then? What would you like to ask our panel?
It's quite a long question, but I think it's quite an important one. What are the speaker's thoughts on retirement planning and supporting younger people who are not children of current clients, but those who still need support to build their own wealth? There's a lot of talk about intergenerational wealth, but as an industry, we need to be thinking about supporting, educating people who don't have that privilege of family wealth, but could be the clients of tomorrow.
Okay, so not kids of clients, but younger clients. What's kind of your take on that? Perhaps, Marie, if I come to you first, and then maybe Kat, if you've got a view.
We were chatting about this on our way. There's some statistic. Now, don't hold me to the figures, but I heard recently in the last couple of weeks that something like 47% of children are no longer asking parents about what they should do with their money. And they're looking to the internet. And of course, everything on the internet is true. I mean, no matter what you read, it's all true. And I think there's a real problem with that split between the natural process of going to your parents to ask them for help and wanting financial help from them. So I do think it's back to the education piece. I think we need to be very, very careful with our younger generation that they're believing everything that they see on the internet, and that some of the financial advice, in inverted commas, it leaves a lot to be desired. It's an old adage, and it's probably a really old-fashioned thing, but my take has always been a third, a third, a third. A third on your mortgage, a third on savings, a third on your expenditure. That's well and truly gone out the window when you talk about mobile phones, leasing a car, fancy holidays and all of that. But I think we need to go back to a bit of old-fashioned basics, and that would be nice to start being filtered through to younger people in an overall message.
Did you have anything to add on that, Kat?
I agree. I wanted to give an example. The very first time I heard about investing was when I was just about to start my very first financial job in Aon as a final salary pension administrator. My dad sat me down and explained how investments go up and down. And I don't know, I think I was about 18. And I was terrified. The idea of that terrified me. I was like, why would anyone do it? It sounds awful. But I got to that job before knowing anything, really. So I think there needs to be an education piece. There needs to be an education piece through school, almost the levels like gaming. And there should be an employer piece. And, you know, as you're going through your life and your career, there needs to be checkpoints for that. And that's something that I think, you know, it has always been missing. And is something that I think we could probably, as an industry, provide a bit more support in.
Okay. And I'm going to override the oracle, sorry.
How dare you?
and just kind of chime in on that, because I think that's kind of something that we're getting from the at-home audiences. This thing about education, you hear it quite a lot. We need to do more around education. But obviously, we haven't cracked it yet because we're still going, we need to do more education. So is there a sense of... I think I might have lost the question now, but I think what is the answer then, as opposed to we need to talk about education? I think that there's a sort of sense of, well, what do we need to be doing to kind of like flesh that out a little bit, I guess.
I think one thing I liked about college, so I left a sort of standard state school, went to college, and then the nice thing about that was that you actually got a bit more exposure to vocational stuff. And actually, that as an idea is quite useful to prepare you for what's going to happen when you leave, and more of that, and getting more of us kind of involved in things like that, I think would be a good start. And then for employers, that is, I remember back in the day there used to be sort of employer-based consultants who'd go in and have the relationship from a provider perspective and have this amazing relationship with the employer to support their employees. And I wonder if there's a bit of a space around that where, you know, there can be education happening, there can be, what's the word? Not seminars, not the right word, but almost like some surgeries where, you know, you're going in and saying, okay, well, I'm going to talk to you for half an hour about retirement planning, and if you've got any questions, there'll be half an hour at the end for you to ask us.
Okay, great. Oracle, what does Niall want to ask?
I don't know, just bear with me one second.
Oh, the Oracle's powers are waning as we speak.
Well, the Oracle needs lunch, that's why.
Oh, okay.
Bear with me one second. So, Niall says, do you see a space for companies like Amazon moving into pensions advice, etc.?
Roland, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, quite frankly, if you look across the financial services spectrum, there's an increasing number of institutions that have transitioned from having a client base and moving into financial services. You know, Saga is probably one of the classic examples. It's a natural transition as you move across. I think we just need to be very, very careful, and this is more of a regulatory point rather than a tech point, that that those types of institutions are equipped and set up in the right way to provide that advice. When you compare that to financial institutions, of which there are a number of those in the room today, have got sort of years, decades, and more of experience and understanding what works, but also what doesn't work, and equity release is one that often comes up in conversation. So I think the opportunity for an Amazon and the like, there are many others of similar ilk and growing, is there. It just needs to be done properly. Technology and their experience can play a role. It just needs to be developed in the right way, or at least that's what I think.
Okay, great. And Marie, kind of when you hear like that kind of being suggested, like Amazon and big brands coming into like pensions and retirement planning, do you think that could kind of give weight to the importance of retirement planning, actually. It could actually be a benefit, or do you still kind of have your reticence of that's not their playground, this is our playground?
I think God help us. I mean, seriously. If you're going to put out, and I don't mean that from an industry point of view or from a professional point of view, I genuinely mean that for our younger people, because I think they'll make decisions based on what a box says, or what an AI says, or what a computer program has said, rather than actually what's going to suit them and what is going to be right for them. I mean, starting something off to get them into the habit of saving and putting money away and not spending, so a mindset there, that's a positive. That would be great. But I think too much emphasis is put on something that's in front of a computer screen where you tick a box and you go, yes, no, maybe, sort of. I don't think that is helpful at all for the future.
Okay.
I'd just like to add something to that. And I think human beings are a mass of contradictions. And day by day, we have different moods, different decisions, different experiences that change the next one. And I don't think yet we found an algorithm that can accommodate such complex, emotional, but also quite primal, tribal people. And so I think there always needs to be a human element, because financial advice is a conversation, and the most you learn and the most benefit you get is from a conversation and from a back and forth. And technology can support and inform those conversations. But I don't think it will ever replace them.
Okay, great. Do we have any more questions? I'm looking from the floor specifically. I don't think so. In which case, thank you very much, Oracle. And thank you to our panel, to Marie, to Kat, and to Roland.